Father Colin, thank you for talking about your early days and also your work and setting up of St Matthew's Church Fund in Ethiopia and also your life in Ethiopia between 1976 and 1994. So your early life, you lived in Stamford?
Yes, I was in Stamford and I went to school in Stamford, and then I went to Oxford when I was 19, I think it was, because my father had died that year, the 63. That was when I went to Oxford, and I was at Keble and I read theology there, and then I went to St Stephen's House where I did some more theology and some classics as well. So I was 5 years in Oxford altogether, and then I went to Wellingborough where I was a curate at St Mary's, a very fine church. But I wasn't there that long. I was there just under 2 years, and then I was approached and asked if I was interested in the scholarship, the Philip Ussher Scholarship, which I applied for. I don't know how many other people were in for it, but I went to Lambeth Palace for that and was interviewed by the Archbishop, who was Michael Ramsey at the time, and there was another committee, and they decided that I could go, and I did to Greece for the best part of a year. The scholarship was £600, which doesn't sound very much now, but I was able to live for a year there quite easily, and travelled extensively. I was based in Salonika in the north of the country, which was better than being in Athens, I think, really. I went down to Athens quite a bit, and I also visited the islands, and I visited Mount Athos, which is up near, not so far from Salonika. So it was a very interesting year. I'd had an interest in the Orthodox Church before that, and had done some study of that when I was in Oxford, and that's how I came to be asked to go there. Before I was asked to go there, I was actually, well, before I went to Ethiopia, I came back from Greece, and I was a curate in Wanstead for about 4 years, I think it was, and while I was there, I was asked if I wanted to be chaplain in Istanbul, of all places, which would have been interesting in some ways, but I decided not to do that. But soon after that, I was approached to ask if I was interested in going to Ethiopia, and I thought it'd be an interesting thing to do, so I said yes, not intending to be there a long time perhaps. But as it turned out, I was there 18 years, so it's a big chunk out of it.
So you fell in love with it pretty quickly?
Yes, it's a very good place, though it was a difficult time because Haile Selassie had just been deposed. He'd actually been murdered by the regime that was in charge when I arrived in March. As I arrived there on April the 1st, and it was quite a difficult time. The Derg was just taking control of the country, and they were fighting among themselves as to who would be the leader of the country. And Mengistu Haile Mariam emerged as the strong man. There was other people. There was a chap who was technically head of state called Teferi Banti, but he was shot one day. There was a shootout at the palace, which was quite near where we were, and we were told an attempted coup had been foiled, though the head of state was dead, which sounded like a successful coup. But anyway, Mengistu emerged as the strong man, and he was in charge of the country until 1991.
So what was life for you like in those early days? I mean, going back, Father Colin, did you, I mean, obviously you were reading the papers in the UK before you went, so you knew the kind of the situation was changing.
Yes, it was a very difficult time, I mean, really, because the Red Terror started soon after I got there, which meant a lot of people were killed. Even in the streets, we had people killed outside the house, and that made everybody nervous. And
there was one story, wasn't there, where you went out and when there was a commotion over people's bodies outside the house, wasn't there?
yes, there were, yeah. But and they were left lying there for some time because people were not allowed to move them. And there was notices put up saying this is what will happen to you if you oppose the government. So it was a very harsh regime, but it was very strict. So security was quite good, in fact, because but it was at a price. There was
so there was a curfew.
Yes, there was a curfew almost the whole of the time I was there, almost for 18 years. But it was only from 12 until 5 or 6, I think.
Sure.
So it wasn't too bad, really, and most people appreciated it, really. It was a time to go home rather than...
So after moving there, the situation really kind of moved fast and also declined for quite a period then?
It did, yes. It was quite a difficult time. But I was in charge of St Matthew's Church, which was an international congregation. There weren't Ethiopians. The Ethiopians were encouraged to go to the Orthodox Church. Yeah. But there were lots of nationalities, about 20 nationalities in the congregation. Mainly Africans, because the Organisation for African Unity and the UN Economic Commission for Africa was based in Addis, which brought a lot of people. And that in turn meant that there were a lot of embassies as well. So we had quite a large congregation. It was not a big church, but the church was more or less full every week. And we had some Sudanese refugees as well. They were around at the time. But we wanted to get more involved with the Orthodox Church and to help, and from that emerged the idea of setting up orphanages because of the famine in 84, 85. We thought that would be a good way to do it. We wanted to do it with the Orthodox Church, really, but that proved too difficult, and so we went in cahoots with an organisation called the Jerusalem Memorial Association, which is why the thing in Ethiopia is still called the Jerusalem Association, because it had that link. And this was an organisation that was orthodox and designed for taking people on pilgrimage to Jerusalem, which was why it was called that. And we went in cahoots with them. It wasn't altogether easy at all dealing with them, but we managed for a time at least, and they continued with us for a number of years.
So is that when you when the 5 orphanages were set up?
Yes, there were 5 orphanages looking after about 1,000 children at one time, but I mean it was because of the severity of the famine. Orphanages are not a good thing really for the country. It's better to support the families so that they stay with the families. And that's what happened eventually, but not immediately.
But hadn't there been a lot of movement of families and children? They were moved around the country.
Yes, they were. The government moved a lot, and they got separated from their parents, and quite a lot came from the north, from Tigray, and a lot of children came.
I remember going to Addis Alum with you, which was the first children's home, in actual fact, and also I remember you pointing out the busloads of people who were just being moved around the country at the time. Yes, that's
right. Yes, it was terrible the way they just bussed people around and took them to areas where they'd not been before, where they thought that they would be better off, but often they were subject to malaria and things which they'd not been subject to in the highlands, and that made it difficult for them.
And St Matthew's Church Fund was really had that come before the children's home? So you'd
No,
actually
St Matthew's Children's Fund was set up to support the homes with money. And Charles Sherlock came originally, and he helped set them up. And there were 5 homes to begin with. There was one in Addis Alum, of course. That was the first. And then there was one in Repi, which was just on the edge of Addis, which had been one of the Ethiopian grandees' houses. And as often happened when they lost it, it became an orphanage. And so that was closed after a time, but that ran for some time. There's one in Bahadar, there was one in Deborah Bahan, there was one in Mendida, which was in Eritrea, but that really was lost when Eritrea became independent, and that was handed over to the government. But there were a lot of children at that time, and so.
And what help and support did you get from the international community in those early days? Because actually, looking after 1,000 children, the charity was looking after 1,000 children, and Save the Children, I think, were looking after 8,000. So you were looking after a huge number of children at the time, with very limited funding. It was incredibly difficult for you.
It was, yes. I mean, we had some support from the American Episcopal Church. They supported us quite well at the beginning, and that's what helped us to get going. But the St Matthew's Children's Fund was set up to raise money in England, mainly to support the homes, and that's what it did.
And Ethiopians were hugely important within the children's home.
Yes.
So I mean, the ethos of the children's home was in many ways, when you look back on it, it was kind of quite unique. But equally, it was in many ways ahead of its time. You'd set out principles of management, hadn't you? That Ethiopians would actually be looking after them.
Yes, it was an entirely Ethiopian organisation, apart from me and Charles Sherlock, really. We were the only 2 who were involved.
And am I right in saying that that kind of the traditions of, and also to train them so that they were well placed to live in society through kind of their farming skills was important?
Yes, that's right. And they went to school, of course, as well, but that was only half a day, and so they did quite a lot of agriculture at the homes, and so that was very good for them.
And then Mulugeta and
Mulugeta started as I mean, we got Charles Sherlock moved on, and we got another chap, but he was very unsatisfactory. In fact, and Mulugeta was there as the treasurer, and eventually we had to sack this other chap because he was just incapable of doing it, really. Although he'd been ambassador in Mexico or somewhere, but but Mulugeta had been the treasurer, I think he was. He was in.
And really, the Ethiopian staff made a massissive contribution to the charity.
Yes. It was a local organisation, really, rather than an international one. And I mean, as is Jerusalem today. I mean, the organisation is a locally based one, although most of its funding comes from outside.
And two of the things that kind of I always remember is, and I use this in talks in the UK, is the amount of chocolate that was shipped out there, which actually helped, which was sold. Was that sold after church services and things? And
we used to have a big bazaar every year. We raised quite a bit of that, and that all went to help the homes and other things.
Yeah, it's amazing, and also the sale of tin cans from food and things like that. Everything really was recycled or sold or added value to really keep those. Because
there wasn't much in the shops in those days. I mean, there was a of shortages of very basic goods.
Yeah.
Things would come and go. There were government supermarkets, but they didn't have things much. There were one or two international things, but they were nationalised eventually. But even while they were there, they were very expensive.
And many foreigners who were working in Addis during the campaign of Red Terror, they left, but you actually stayed.
Yes, we stayed. Yes, I mean, they also stayed when the Derg fell, because that was a very hairy time as well. Because,
and the Kabelis had absolute ultimate power. How much power did they have?
Well, they were given too much power, really. I mean, the Kabeli chairman could arrange for people to be executed, even, you know.
Right.
So,
it was that bad.
but the government did clamp down on that when that got out of control, really.
Right.
So they had to do something about it, really. But it was a military regime. It was a military takeover, you see. So they were all ex-military people.
And was your were you ever threatened with kind of told to leave the country at all, or?
Not really. Well,
no.
Sometimes we had. It always depends on who you know. I mean, I was having difficulty with my work permit one year. They were refusing to renew it, but so I went to our lawyer, knowing that he was the brother of the foreign minister.
Right.
And said, I'm having this problem, and I wondered if you can do something about it. And within a week they rang up and said, come and collect your work permit. I mean,
Good.
It's always a question of who you know in Ethiopia, you know, so
that
was how we did it. The children's homes were under the auspices, government-wise, of the Children's Commission at that time.
Right.
It was a Children's Commission that dealt with this. Actor to Sarah work, who later became chairman of Jerusalem, in fact, after he retired, after the Derg had gone. And so it was incredible.
Actually, in fairness to both Parts for Change and also JECTO, they've worked very closely with government, both national and also regional.
Well, you have to.
Yeah,
I mean, you
do.
You can't do it
absolutely.
without. And that's still the case. I mean,
Yeah.
you still can't work without.
I think that's what's made it in some ways a survivable and sustainable success. It is.
Yeah,
you know, there has been.
I mean, there are difficulties at the moment because the government's not very keen on NGOs, and you know, they prefer to do it themselves. But
I think this is as close as they can. I think that what they are keen on is some social accountability, and JECTO actually and Parts for Change do provide that. And also, what I love about the charity is that it is an indigenous NGO with support from Pete and the trustees and also the ambassadors in the UK.
Yes, all the people who work for it are Ethiopian.
Yeah. So, when did Comic Relief come on board?
I can't remember exactly when that was, but that was relatively late.
Right.
It was, I think, that was after I left.
Was it? But really, they gave a huge amount of
support. They gave a lot of money.
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah. So some years later, the children's homes were shut down. That must have been a very difficult time.
Gradually, they were shut down. The place at Debrecen, originally we were in a large, what had been the private house of an Armenian,
right,
and on one of the lakes, and then we got some land. In fact, Bahanu had a big role in getting that land because he became very friendly with the military chap down there,
right,
and it was through him that they got the present site, really.
What, at Debrecen?
At Debrecen.
Because he actually was very influential of getting Addis Ababa as well, wasn't he?
He was, yeah.
So he did.
He did a lot. It was an enormous site at Debrecen. You'd never get that kind of amount of land now.
No.
It'd be impossible to get.
I mean, they are, in some ways, they are asset rich, but capital poor in some ways, aren't they? When you look at Bahadar, they've got 70 acres there, which is absolutely wonderful. And you think, if it had the funding, it could do so much more, really. I mean, so we live in hope. We live in hope.
It was a very big area at Bahadar.
So could you tell us about the process? Because what happened was the children's homes obviously were there, they were needed, they provided...
Yes. The government provided the land, because the government owns all the land in the country.
So it's a good partnership, really.
Yeah.
And then times changed, those children grew up, there wasn't the need for children's homes. And as you quite rightly have already said, that actually the best social care is within the community. So Ejecto or Partners for Change really changed their way they worked.
A lot of the children, as they got older, were sent back to the areas they'd come from. Yeah. They all found people.
Would Partners for Change help with that process as well?
Yes, they paid for them to go. That was how the homes came to be.
Because without a family or without you're just nothing in Ethiopia, are you really? I mean,
no. Well, everybody's got a family, and there's no such thing as an orphan, really. In Ethiopia, everybody's got a family. There's extended families, you know. So the idea of not having anybody is nonsense, really.
It is.
They all had somebody.
And the one thing we've seen,
when they went back to those areas, they found people.
Yeah. And the one thing we've seen actually since is that actually there is a huge amount of caring goes on between aunties, uncles, and distant relatives of children.
And if they've got money to support the children, they'd be more than happy to have them. It's just that the poverty means that they can't do it without some support.
And that's what Partners
support. That's what Partners for Change
and the comic relief support has actually done really well over 30 years.
Things have changed, because originally the idea was to strengthen links between the Anglican Church and the Orthodox Church. That was the purpose of these things.
Could you tell us about the process and outcomes of Partners for Change? What was, when in the early days when the children's homes when the children's homes closed, and then the whole ethos was really about kind of training and supporting in the communities.
Yeah.
How would you kind of summarise the Partners for Change? I mean, it seems a highly adaptable charity.
It is, yes. I mean, the name Partners for Change was only adapted relatively recently. It wasn't Matthews. It was St Matthew's Children's Fund until then, and the children were all brought up as Orthodox. Yeah, you see, and some of them were not from a Christian background even. Some had come from Muslim. Yeah.
Today you go back and you see the work that's gone. It's gone back, and I think the one thing for me is I still think that actually Partners for Change and Ejecto in some ways a new crossroads. It's a new stage of adaptation.
Yes, it is, yeah.
And I think the one thing that really strikes me is what they've done for equality within the community. I think they have given certainly women a greater opportunity within the community and training. Yeah. Most of that, a far greater proportion of money actually is spent on the children. So you do see that families come out of poverty and children benefit as a result of it. So really, the work isn't done. There's still a huge amount to do.
I mean, the population is increasing rapidly. I mean, it's double the size it was when I was there. I think the population of Ethiopia was about 50 million when I was there. It's getting on for 100 million now.
So it's double.
So, it's colossal. And unlike Western countries, half the population is under 18.
Yes.
You see, that's hugely different from here.
Yeah.
Where it's an ageing population, and people tend to have small families. There still people have large families on the whole.
Yeah, I think the number of children per family has decreased, but the population is obviously still increasing.
Hugely.
And really, those youngsters have got to be given opportunity.
Yes. Yeah.
And in fairness,
I mean, some have done very well. Some have been to university even. You know, from the homes, if they've had the ability to do it, they've been given the chance.
I think what is nice is you can never tell what I think the one thing with youth is you never know what they will do. But equally, most of them actually make good lives and really add value to the communities and society of Ethiopia. So, how often do you go back then?
Well, I go back once a year, and sometimes, well, quite often twice a year. So I keep in touch with the situation and with what is happening in the country.
I mean, how would you sum up Parts of a Change? Because it is, for me, it just seems a really special charity.
Yes, its history and the way it's set up is different from almost every other charity.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like the big ones like Save the Children and Oxfam and things like that, but it has a lot to offer.